Audio recording for this meeting has begun.
Into the specific tasks and deliverables associated with this TA project, and then we'll give you an idea of the timeline. So let's start by just thinking of what has happened in the past year. It's been a this year has been full of a lot of activity. There's been a lot going on. So let's just take some time to reflect. Around this time last year, you all may recall participating in the environmental scan. It was a research project that we had put into place to get an idea of where all states were in their background check implementation processes. The environmental scan was a combination of surveys and interviews that many of you participated in, and we were trying to get some more information from CCDF lead agencies as well as their state partners such as state police, child welfare agencies, and any other office or agency within your state that had a hand in the background check process to get a better sense of where you all were implementation-wise. And thankfully, we had a very high participation rate, and it's really guided the other activities that we put into place, the other TA activities and policy activities that we put into place for the rest of the year. And there's been a lot of other activity going on. You may have heard of the NCIC NSOR technical solution. That's the National Crime Information Center, National Sex Offender Registry technical solution. This was a technical solution that was developed by the FBI. It was to streamline the NCIC NSOR name-based check and to improve the retrieval process of the results of that check. You may have heard of it, or your state may have even created its own technical solution around that issue. So that has been going on, and some activities around that were to have started earlier this year. So that's still underway. And of course, with the pandemic, we know that there have been a number of disruptions to your operations. Many of you may have been in the midst of developing new policy, new legislation to come into compliance with the requirements. But as we know, COVID-19 has presented a lot of challenges. And with those challenges, you have all had to make adjustments. And, you know, with that, you may have had to request relief from certain background check requirements through the waiver process that we put in place earlier this year. There were also some waivers expiring. We like to call them the transitional waivers. And these transitional waivers gave states the opportunity to have a bit more implementation time for certain components of the comprehensive background check, and those expired September 30th of this year. And so with COVID-19, there was an opportunity for states to apply for waivers for requirements that were previously waived through the transitional waivers that expired on September 30th, 2020. So that has all been happening. Also, we just wrapped up the Tribal, State, and Territory Administrators meeting, or TSTAM, and there were a lot of important updates during that event. By now, you should have received the CCDF State and Territory preprint. There was a Federal Register announcement providing a draft of that. You still have a few more days to submit your comments on that, but one of the most notable changes to the next state plan cycle is that there have been some changes and updates to the background check section. There's more of an emphasis on describing the procedures that you have in place, or the processes that you have in place, and being able to understand which agencies in your states conduct certain parts of the background check process. So that is out there, and along with the new preprint, there has been some changes to a few of the requirements, namely the consumer education website requirement, which is now requiring you to provide specific instructions around your background check processes on your consumer education website. So I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But just looking ahead for the rest of this year, we are offering this technical assistance opportunity, and we'll also be providing you with some additional resources on this call. Okay, so a lot of us are pretty familiar with all of the different components of the background check, but when I looked at the registration list for this webinar, I noticed there were a number of state offices and agencies that weren't just the lead agencies. So I'm going to take just a quick opportunity to go through the checks, the required checks of the Child Care and Development Block Grant Act. You have the 3 in-state checks, the 2 national checks, and the 3 interstate checks for staff members that have lived in another state in the last 5 years. And when I look at these checks, I like to put them into buckets. Usually the criminal and sex offender checks are going to fall under the purview of the criminal justice agency in your state, as well as the national checks, the FBI fingerprint check, the NCIC NSOR, and all of those criminal and sex offender checks are usually handled by your criminal justice agency. And then, of course, the child abuse and neglect checks usually fall under the child welfare agency. Now, there is some variation depending on the state, depending on your operational structure and your laws, but that's generally how things fall. Okay, so one thing that I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about is the State Identification Bureau. We're going to be using this term a lot throughout this presentation, the SIB. It might not be a term that you're familiar with. Most people, when they talk about the agency in their state that handles criminal justice data or criminal data, they usually refer to the state police. They're usually talking about the criminal justice agency and an investigative bureau, the criminal records division. But the most general term kind of captures all of that is the State Identification Bureau. That's the terminology that the FBI uses. There's actually a list of all SIBs organized by state and territory on the FBI's webpage. And this is really just the agency in your state that maintains the criminal history repository in your state. So we're going to be using this term a lot, so just keep that in mind when you see it. Okay. So there are a lot of FBI services that are attached to the activities within your state's SIB, namely the National Fingerprint-based FBI check, the National Crime Information NCIC NSOR check, the wrap-back services that the FBI offers, and of course the National Fingerprint File, or the NFF program. And the reason why I want to mention these to you today is just to keep in mind that these are all FBI Criminal Justice Information Service programs. These are all maintained by the FBI and managed by your state's SIB, which receive their instructions, their policies and procedures from the FBI. So, you know, a number of you have reached out to us for help on these topics, but the best person that you can reach out to is your state's SIB on these topics for any updates, for any changes. Every state does these slightly differently. Every state has their own approach to these different topic areas. So the best thing is to really reach out to your state's SIB in getting more information on this. Okay, and just to clarify, the FBI wrap-back services, the wrap-back service is a subscription service that allows agencies to receive notification of criminal activity on individuals that are subscribed. So if there's a child care provider or staff member that is subscribed under the FBI's wrap-back services, they will be continuously monitored on criminal and arrest activity, and your state's SIB receives alerts from the FBI on that particular individual. And this particular service is very helpful because it provides constant alerts on the FBI fingerprint check. So you don't have to do that check every 5 years if that person's being constantly monitored. And it's interesting because your state might also have its own version of a wrap back check that encompasses the other components of the background check, such as the sex offender check, the criminal history check, and maybe some others. So just keep that in mind. Okay, next slide. Okay, great. And so I'm curious, throughout this presentation, we are going to be asking you a few poll questions just to get a sense of where you all are with communicating with your SIB, your criminal justice partners. If you wouldn't mind, please take this time to answer the question above. And Teresa, I'll let you have this one if you want to give any more information.
No, I think you covered it. There is the poll up top, which it looks like a lot of people are voting on. And if you selected other, if you look right below, there is a place where you can chat in your answer for any other topics that you would like to write in. So we'll just give this a couple minutes until we start seeing votes slowing down.
Right. And if you have a question about the NFF, about the NFF program participation, what that is, and we've provided some guidance on this as well in the past, and we can, we'll be providing a resource that links to that program instruction, but the National Fingerprint File is really a great service to be a part of. We actually consulted with the FBI, and we spoke to them, and we realized that an FBI fingerprint check, if you are participating in the National Fingerprint File and you're an NFF state, when you conduct an FBI fingerprint check, it actually satisfies the CCDBG requirement to perform an interstate check of another state's criminal history record. So that's one check that you don't really have to worry about if you're an NFF state. The fingerprint check covers the interstate criminal check if that person has lived in another state. And you can see all of the states in yellow in that map down there who are currently participating. So if you know about your state's current status in joining that, or if you've asked your criminal justice partners about that, we'd love to know. Okay.
All right, it looks like the votes have slowed down a bit. So it looks like folks have reached out mostly on the FBI fingerprint check with 87%. And then it's kind of staggered throughout. It looks like NCIC, NSOR, in-state criminal fingerprint check, and in-state sex offender check come in second. And then the NFF program, the FBI wrap back, and your state's wrap back. I guess that changed as well, so it looks like that's in second place. But it's all kind of fluctuating, so I think we are going to end this poll and move on. We did have one person type in other, which is implementation of live scan, which is definitely a good topic to reach out to your State Information Bureau. And it looks like we also have a couple of chats. So can you define what participation only means on the NFF map? And it would be much easier for states to participate in the NFF rather than states having to go to multiple individual states for criminal record check information.
All right, great. So we'll actually be sharing a resource that dives a little bit more into what an NFF state is. And to answer your question, Joshua, this map is also showing states that are compact states. And the compact state is a state that's ratified the National Crime Prevention and Privacy Compact Act. And those states are also required to share certain criminal information with other states. And Ryan, you're correct. Yes, participating in the NFF is easier than having to go to multiple individual states for criminal record check information. That's correct. Yes, these slides will be made available in a few days. Yes? And FBI.
Okay, so
Yes, correct.
let's move on. Oh,
Correct.
sorry, go ahead.
Yes, no, that's fine. I'm glad that everyone's so engaged, but we will have more information on these. We have quite a bit of information to get through, so I want to take the time to do that as well. Okay, so another question, just to get a sense of where we all are again, do you meet regularly with your criminal justice partners or with your SID? And how long have you been meeting with your SID and criminal justice partners? You know, maybe you have a meeting every quarter or once a month or maybe weekly. That'd be great. Okay. All right, so it looks like we have a mix as well. Okay. So the reason why we ask this question is that it's so important to be meeting with your criminal justice partners. If you have questions on these topics in this slide, they're the ones that are going to be able to answer in depth and to give you some more insight on what direction you might be going. Maybe your state is in the process of enrolling in NFF or RAP back service, and that could really impact how you do checks for your staff members. So it's really important to know that information and to be up to date. Okay, so great. So for those of you that have been meeting with your partners for more than 3 years, that's great. And if you've just started, that's great as well. Okay. Okay, I think we can move on. Okay. So to give you a little bit more information on all of these different FBI programs, your State Identification Bureau, and what exactly their role is within your state, we have put together a resource that summarizes all of this, and not just what we discussed in the previous slide, but a lot of other things as well. We get a little bit more into the sex offender checks, you know, the differences between the NCIC NSOR, your in-state sex offender check, as well as the National Sex Offender public website. You know, those are all different resources that you may be utilizing to do sex offender checks in your state, and we really break that down in this resource. So if you could drop that in the chat, Teresa, that would be great. That link there. Perfect. So you can visit that, and it will have a lot more information. It will answer some of the questions that came up in the chat as well. Okay? All right, moving on. Okay, so just again, your state partners are very critical. Having these relationships with your state partners is critical to implementing these various checks. Your child welfare service agency, your criminal justice agency, the licensing agency, and of course even the providers, making sure that they have a good understanding of the policies and procedures that you're putting forth, and that they know their role in requesting checks and you know, taking in candidates that may be potential child care staff members, employees. Okay, so since we're talking about other partners, what is your relationship with your state child abuse and neglect partners? Now again, this may be child welfare services in your state. This could be, I know a lot of human service agencies are typically housed with their child welfare agencies. You know, the structure is different depending on what state you're in, but let us know if you have a regular meeting schedule with your child abuse and neglect partners or your child welfare services partner. Because when it comes to those in-state child abuse and neglect checks or the interstate child abuse and neglect checks, it's really important to understand who resides in those registries, what kind of offenses are required to be reported and put into those registries. There's so many different rules from state to state, and it's really important that you understand what the rules are in your state and that you're having that constant communication with your child welfare agency. Okay, so a lot of you, it seems pretty even. Yes, we meet regularly, quite a few, and many of you have been meeting for more than 3 years. Okay, great. All right. And this is just another question that we had here. Are there other state partners in your state that you think that you should be meeting with regularly? Okay, so we sort of brainstormed, and we know that there are a lot of other pieces to this background check process. There are provider organizations, there are parent organizations, tribal partners, CCRNRs. Okay, some of you are stating state police and CCRNRs. Great. Okay. Oh, great. Getting a lot of different answers. Okay, and thank you for putting your questions and your comments in the chat. It's really great to see everyone participating. Children's Services Council, great. I see parent and provider organizations, state police, state patrol licensing. Yes, there are so many different partners and actors throughout your state that really need to be a part of this process. And just a quick clarification on the NFF question that came up previously. So if you are a state conducting an interstate criminal justice check, criminal check of a state where another person resided, it's the responding state that has to be National Fingerprint File state or an NFS state. And again, I know it's a lot of information that we're throwing at you. That information is in the guide that we linked in the chat, so you can read up on that a bit more. Okay, great. Thank you all for writing these answers in. Wonderful. Okay, moving on. So aside from the in-state partnerships that we have been talking about just now, there are also some interstate partnerships that are needed to be developed and maintained if we're going to be moving forward with successful implementation of the background check requirements. So we know there are a number of interstate check challenges. It's probably the most complicated component of the requirements. There are many states that have been working on this since 2014, 2015, when the CCDBG law was reauthorized and these new requirements were put into place. And we know that because there's no system, this is largely a manual process. And there's a lot of variation from state to state on what is required to request a check, what is required to respond to a check. Can I respond to this request as a state? Do my laws allow me to respond? There are just a number of different elements that have to be considered when doing these checks across state lines. And so what we've done is we've put out a new reporting requirement that might help you get a handle on what each state's instructions are around interstate background checks. So this is actually a change to one of the rules in the CCDF final rule. It's requiring states and territories to post specific information pertaining to their interstate background checks to their consumer education website. And this is actually, as I mentioned, it's a new requirement in this new state plan that you've just received as well. So the reason why we decided to make this change is we wanted to minimize the confusion around, who should I be contacting if I want to initiate an interstate check request? What instructions do I need? What forms do I need to fill out? Who do I need to contact? What fees do I need to pay? We wanted to have all of this information in one place. So we're requiring states to put their information on their consumer education website so another state that needs to make a request of your state can find all that information in one place. Okay, so as I said, this is a new requirement that is now in the new state plan preprint, and you'll have flexibility in deciding how you want to structure this web page and how you want to provide that information, but it has to be a designated web page on your consumer ed website. And just to give you an idea of the elements that will be required for each type of check, this gives you an idea. Of course, basic contact information. A number of you already have this information, but not all of it. So basic contact information, any websites or portals that are associated with this check. Some of you have portals where people can actually sign in and request the check themselves. There's payment information that you'll need to include, forms, fee information, and maybe additional information on maybe how you define, for example, for the interstate child abuse and neglect check, information on how you make a determination of who might be in the CAN registry, because that's something that varies from state to state. So we will have more specific guidance view on this. This is just to give you an idea. This was information that was already published in the Federal Register. So you can revisit that if you'd like, or you can take a look at this chart, but there will be more guidance coming. Okay, so a number of you have already indicated in the chat that you might have a website like this already, or you have some of this information available to states who are making interstate requests. And just asking this question, how are you working on a page like this? Do you have one? Do you not have one? It'd be good to get a sense of where everyone is on that. Okay, great. So it looks like the majority of you have one. And when this guidance comes out, you'll have an idea of how you might need to tweak it, or what other elements you might need to add to be meeting that new consumer education requirement. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so now that we've gone through some of those background check topics, let's get right into the TA offering that we have available to all of you. Okay, so here's the overview of the TA project. We're going to be working very closely with NICSIA. So Office of Child Care and NICSIA will be working very closely to provide tailored, individualized technical assistance to lead agencies. We'll also be grouping agencies by challenge area so that they can work through some of these challenges together. It's always great to have these peer communities where states can bounce ideas off of each other and sort of help each other out. But aside from the cohorts and the groups, we'll also be working with states on an individual basis as well. And the goal is to develop a plan that will support each state in achieving full compliance. Excuse me. So what this looks like is the development of a work plan that will really help you navigate this process of coming into compliance. We'll be setting milestones for you, some goals, and we'll be tracking your progress in meeting these goals and completing these goals. So we'll be developing materials to assist states in implementing these different checks. We'll have updated progress reports, and we'll be identifying the key challenges in your states, maybe some of the policy gaps, maybe some common solutions that could be of use to you. And this report will ultimately help us develop updated policies on our end, maybe some more policy interpretation questions and FAQs that could help you, that could in turn help you. So the question that we have for this slide is, what background check components or requirements do you need the most assistance with? You can check any that apply at this time. And I know that with COVID-19, there are some unique challenges associated with the pandemic. You can also keep that in mind if that's something that has been hindering your completion or your compliance with the requirement as well. So that's always something to consider. Okay. So of course, the interstate criminal check is a big one. That's not surprising, right? The interstate checks have the highest count. Yes. Yes, and Dinah Davis, yes, one of the big problems is closed record states. Yes, that is a big issue. A number of you have mentioned that. Okay. Again, thank you all for participating and being so active. The 180-day separation requirement. So this is tied to the 5-year requirement. So every staff member in your state has to be checked every 5 years, right? That's in the statute and the law and the regulations. Each staff member has to be checked every 5 years. Now, if they are separated from employment for any reason for more than 180 days, they would have to go through a new background check. So if let's say they got a check in 2020, right, and they were separated from employment, a few months after that, and they wanted to go back into childcare, on that 181st day, they would have to actually get a whole new background check. So that is the 180-day separation from employment requirement. Okay. All right, great. So yeah, that's a question that comes up a lot. So these are things that we'd like to help you with. There's a lot of brushing up that probably needs to be done with some of the background check policies that are out there. It's hard to keep track of it all because there is so much. So we can definitely help you all in just getting a firmer grasp of what is expected with these requirements. Okay? Okay. So now I'm going to get into the meat of this TA opportunity. I'm going to go through a very detailed list of all of the different tasks and the deliverables organized by each entity that is going to be part of this TA project, okay? So the first is Office of Child Care, us. We're already introducing this TA opportunity to all of you. The next step is to work closely with the regional offices in identifying which of the states may need this TA. And of course, you all will have the opportunity to volunteer yourselves, but we're going to be working very closely with your regional offices to identify who might benefit the most from this. And we'll also be working on analyzing your state plans and tracking progress towards your milestones. So I'm going to go through each one of these components in detail. Okay, so first is OCC. And I've already pretty much described this. We're going to be, at the end of all this, we'll have a state of the state report that sort of reports out on where all states are in this process, all states that participate in this TA opportunity, and we're really going to be focusing on tracking progress and handling the first phase of this, which is the recruitment of all of you who will be joining. Okay, the next aspect or the next entity is NICSIA. They're going to have a very large role in conducting the actual focus group meetings with the lead agencies and the different partners in the state. So that could be the Criminal Justice Agency, the Child Abuse and Neglect Agency, the licensing office, any tribal partners, anyone who is involved in this overall background check process. We're going to be identifying the key challenges, the gaps, and any solutions that could aid in the full implementation of the checks. So we'll be, NICSIA and OCC will be developing like a playbook for you that will help you navigate this process. We'll be going through the existing rules and policies around CCDBG background checks so that you are all familiar with the existing rules. And we'll be developing many products, services that should be helpful to you as we go through this process. Okay, next is the lead agency. What are the expectations around the lead agency in this TA project? Well, there are quite a few. So we're going to make sure that you are all up to speed on the current guidance, any existing policies that are out there so that you're all familiar with what is out there. Someone just asked about the 180-day separation. That's a policy. That's a rule in the CCDF final rule. And so we want to just make sure that everyone knows what is expected of them with the background check process, because there are a lot of rules associated with it. So we want to make sure, does everyone have an understanding of what the rules are? And then we'll look through the rules and we'll see where there might be some policy and process gaps in your state. What are the challenges? What kind of technologies are you using? What can we address to sort of move you forward? And then we'll develop a joint action plan between your agency and the other partners within your state to address all the different background check components. Okay, and then that's about it. And then the next section is we will have the state plan. The state plan, what I mentioned earlier about the state plan is important because it really puts an emphasis on the processes that you have in place. So you'll be working on your state plans while we're going through all of this. And we'll also have an actual project plan associated with this TA project. So it's kind of going to be going hand in hand, and you'll be able to understand maybe what resources you need to really to pull this off. What other rules might you have to implement in your state? Who's responsible for what, and what kind of timeline are we looking to do all of this in? So there's going to be a lot coming at you, and we just want to make sure that you're all ready to take this on if you decide to go forward with this. And then, of course, we can't leave out the child care provider because they have just as much of a role in all of this as you do. We want to make sure they're up to date with all of the guidance and policies. We want to make sure they understand what they need to be doing, because they're the ones that are submitting, in a lot of cases, they're the ones that are submitting the background check requests for the individuals that are looking for employment. And they're the ones that maybe they have a hand in tracking who needs to get background checks and who hasn't gotten a certain check done, and maybe who's waiting for this check, who's waiting for certain components of the check. And so there will be a report associated with the child care provider as well. And so with all that being said, there will be 2 tracks for this TA. There's going to be targeted technical assistance, and then there's going to be intensive technical assistance. The targeted technical assistance is more so what I mentioned earlier with the cohorts. The cohorts are really going to be grouped by challenge areas. There's going to be, this is going to be offered to more states, at least 10, possibly more who need it, and we'll group you all by challenge area. If you're having issues with maybe the interstate criminal check, or if you're having issues with the FBI fingerprint check, maybe that's something that we would work on. So we'd have ongoing consultation, peer-to-peer consultation with the other states that are having that issue. We'll review maybe your policies, your procedures, and any other documents associated with the process. We'll help you facilitate those conversations with your state partners to get those pieces moving. And we'll be keeping in touch with you and managing this project overall. So that's the first level. The second level is the intensive TA, which is a lot more, maybe a lot more focused and a lot more comprehensive. We're offering this to 5 agencies, 5 lead agencies that need this the most. So it'll include all of the elements that are listed on the left, but it's also going to include on-site or virtual visits because of the pandemic, monthly check-in calls with the lead agency and the state partners all together. Okay, so it's going to be very comprehensive. Okay. So with all of that being said, and I know that was a lot of information, these results are not going to be broadcast, but if you're interested in targeted TA or the intensive TA, you can indicate that on this slide. And please, if you've said yes to either of those options, please include your name and your role and your state and territory in that second box. Okay. So I see a couple of questions here. Will there be states that are considered compliant in the targeted and intensive groups? What I think you mean by that, and I could be wrong, but there are some states that are compliant at the moment, but as I said, things may have changed because of the pandemic. There are a number of states that were once compliant but have ran into a few barriers due to COVID-19. So things may have changed for everyone. So yeah, it's possible. I think states. Yeah, it is going to be a lot of time and work, Tara. It is. That's why we wanted to present this to you all and let you know what's going to be expected. It's going to be a lot of time and work, but it has to be done. And between now, when we start the TA in January or late December, between then and September 30th of 2021, it's really only 8 or 9 months. So it's a lot to do in that time. But I mean, what else are you going to do to meet or to come into compliance? It's going to require a lot of effort, yes. And we have a webinar with states that have had success in full compliance. We actually have a resource at the end of this presentation that sort of outlines some states that have had some really great success in meeting some of the requirements and have, implemented some really innovative solutions to meet the requirements. So we'll be sharing that at the end, but that's a good idea. We can definitely consider that. hearing directly from states. Yes. Yeah, I like the ideas that are coming up in the chat. Great. Okay. I'm just going to give you all a little bit more time to think of this answer before we move on. Yeah, so I'm looking at the chat. Yes. Yeah, as I said, there are states that that may have been in full compliance, but we are all, everyone's sort of in the same boat now with the pandemic, and so there are a number of things that have changed. So we'll have to reassess. We'll have to look at that and get back to you. But I do like the idea of maybe having a session where states that have been successful in implementing the requirements prior to COVID-19 could maybe speak on that. Okay. All right. So thank you all for being so active in participating in that. Please, if you said yes to the targeted TA or yes to the intensive TA, please also write your name, your role, and your state and territory in the second box if you haven't done so already. Okay, because I've gotten 10 so far, but there are at least 17 of you, maybe, or more, that have indicated interest. Okay. Okay, the numbers are going up. Great. Thank you all. So a lot of you are saying that you'd like to talk to other states. So the great thing about this is that when we do the targeted TA kickoff session, we'll have kickoff sections for each TA bucket that I just mentioned. We will have a chance, we will give you a chance to speak with states that have had different implementation experiences. So that is definitely something we're looking into. So Joshua, sorry about that. Yes, if you're interested in the targeted or in the intensive TA, please put your name. Either one. Sorry for that. All right. Great. All right. So I'm going to leave those survey or those poll questions up, and we're gonna move on so you can have some time to think about it. Okay. So just to keep everything in mind, okay, this is what this TA opportunity is going to look like for the remainder of this year and going into next year. We have NICSIA, which now you all know is the National Center on Subsidy Innovation and Accountability. We call them the Subsidy Center as well for short. So they're going to be really taking the lead on this project, and they're going to be working very closely with us, OCC, both central office, which is where I sit, and the OCC regional offices, which is who you all have direct contact with for the most part, most of the time. And then there's you all, the lead agency, and your partners, the SIB, the criminal justice partner, the child abuse and neglect partners in your state, the offices in your state. And then the third layer is the providers in your state, okay? Licensed, registered, or regulated, whatever terminology you use, and then the license exempt providers. Okay, so there has to be a plan of action or strategy for both of those types of providers, because we're looking at different types of background checks, and we're also looking at different provider settings and different types of providers, different departments in your state. I mean, maybe different licensing requirements in your state. There's so much to consider, and so we're trying to wrap all of that into one opportunity so that we can help you navigate that and think through some of the barriers, the challenge areas, and the sticking points that you've all been having. Okay. So again, I mentioned this earlier, but there's a guide out there right now that actually highlights some states that have done some really innovative things as far as interagency partnerships and interstate partnerships, solutions and strategies that have helped them streamline and improve their background check processes. So definitely take a look at that, and you might get some ideas. You might find some similarities between those states and your states. Okay. And lastly is the timeline. So I know a lot of you are realizing that this is going to be a lift, a pretty heavy lift. It's going to take effort. It's going to take time. So just to give you an idea of what our expectations are between now and January, we've already shared this information with you today. The next step is to take many of you have already volunteered yourselves for this TA opportunity, which I'm very happy to see. So we'll be taking your poll answers, and we'll also be taking some of the recommendations that your regional offices have put forth, and we're going to be meeting with your regional offices and discussing, you know, which state might be a better fit for this type of TA, and we're just going to be discussing next steps. Okay, so for those of you who volunteered, we'll be reaching out to your regional office to determine next steps, and we'll let you know what's going to be coming next, because after that we'll be sending formal invitation letters to you all, formally inviting you to this TA opportunity, and that's when you'll have the chance to bring in your state partners who also need to be a part of this. Okay, so it might take some time for you to coordinate communication with those state partners and to get them on board. And just note that we can also help you with that process as well. Maybe you want to put an agreement in place between you and your state police and your child welfare office and your licensing office to, you know, really agree to commit to this TA opportunity, and we can help you with that. And even if you don't take part in this TA opportunity, we can still give you a template or some sort of resource that can help you navigate this process. And so by next week, I anticipate having an overview document that summarizes all of the points in this presentation out to you, as well as a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. So you'll have that for your reference. So you should get that by next week as well. And so just to go back to this timeline, once you've had the chance to talk to your state partners, because it's very important that you bring your state partners into this. If we're just working with you all as lead agencies, it's not going to be as effective. We need the state police, we need the licensing office, we need your child welfare partners on board with this so that we can really walk through your policies, crosswalk your policies, and, you know, assess where the areas, the challenge areas are, where the gaps are, so that we can move you forward. So once you've gotten your state partners on board and in agreement to join you in this effort, we can begin our cohort calls in the very beginning of December. So this will be both for the intensive TA group and the targeted TA group, okay? And then we will actually begin the TA process in early January. Now, these are just tentative dates. There could be some shifting, some slight shifting here and there as we adjust. And, you know, the holiday season is coming up, so it can be hard to, you know, get responses. I understand that. But if you're joining this opportunity, try your best to get your state partners on board. And that should be really helpful to all of us. And as I said, just as a reminder, between December and between September and next September, which is the new compliance deadline, it's really only 8 or 9 months. So there's going to be a lot of activity happening in that time. So anyway, I really appreciate your attendance during this webinar. It looks like we ended a bit early, but that's fine because it'll give you some more time to think about whether you'd like to join in on this TA project. Thank you so much for your participation. We had a very active chat, very active participation in the polls. It was fantastic. None of you are shy at all, so thank you. And so I don't see any questions in the chat, so it seems like we need to go. So I'll leave you with this information, and as I said, I'll be getting a copy of this PowerPoint and an overview document to you by next week, so you can review this and think about it some more. And until then, have a great rest of your Friday afternoon, and hopefully I will see you on the other side. Okay, thank you.